Ah, yes. 4 years ago, this album came out.
So far away from me.
One of my favorite Dire Straits songs.
So far,
I just can't. It's been a while since I've done this podcast. Welcome. I'm your host, Lion Cat. All right. That's right. So far away from me, Dire Straits. Thank you, boys. But welcome to another edition. We are 4.5 months away from the start of the college football season, and the transfer portal has gone nuts. Not to mention the whole Nico Ayamaleva thing. Makes me sick to my stomach. And as I said in a tweeter machine the other day, when they started the transfer portal and NIL, did they not come up with these particular scenarios? Did the powers that be sit in a room and say, oh, yeah, we think players should get paid, and that's it? The transfer portal, we don't think it's going to be too much of a big deal. Did they not think that this kind of shit was going to happen? Once you open Pandora's box, you cannot close it. I see people talking about salary caps and general managers. It's not college football anymore. It's semi-pro football. When you have representatives for Nico saying, well, we made the playoffs, our quarterback needs more money. Did the powers that be not think about these type of things? Tom Luganbill was on here a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about said NIL transfer portal and stuff like that, and he said there should be a salary cap. Or if you leave to go somewhere for other money, maybe you don't get that money. Or let's say you go somewhere else. You were here, what, a year? You get 25%. Let's say it was getting $4 million. All right. You're not happy with it? Go ahead. You're only here for a year. You're here for a year out of your 4-year college career. Guess what? You only get 25%. It has gotten so out of control, it's not funny. It's the spring portal, by the way. First day of the spring portal. Again, makes me sick. There should be one portal. One transfer window. That's it. One. Shouldn't be during the season. There should not be a transfer portal in December. None of it. You let the season play out. You let signing day go. And once all that takes place, you have your national letters of intent in February. Wait till all that's done. You have one transfer portal, one window, and that's it. And it shouldn't be this late in the spring either. Once the high school kids sign their letters of intent to go wherever, then maybe a couple of weeks after that in February, then you have your transfer portal. One window, one. North Carolina quarterback Ryan Brown is now officially in the transfer portal. Since Belichick took over, North Carolina has 11 scholarship players that have entered the portal. And just some of the stuff from today. Wisconsin tight end Tanner Koziol has re-entered the transfer portal. Played for Ball State last year. UCLA among the schools that are eyeing Nico Iamaleva. Good luck with that. FIU transfer linebacker Eddie Walls III is planning to visit Tulsa this weekend. SMU wide receiver Ashton Cozart, he is re-entering the transfer portal. He originally signed with Oregon's 2023 class, and now he's in the transfer portal. USC defensive end Lorenzo Cowan, three-star recruit in 2024. He's entered the transfer portal. Again, I would challenge you to go to the transfer portal and check in on it. See how many players have transferred. It's mind-boggling. You can't go through them in a day. This isn't free agency in college sports. It's just, I don't like it here, I'm leaving. What do you have, 80-some players on scholarship, 93 or 100, whatever it is? I think there's 138 Division I college teams. So you're talking 13,000 players. Half of them are in the portal. A name that caught my eye, and I saw him play in high school there in Phillipsburg, New Jersey. He was a senior. I was a junior, but I did go watch him play. Notre Dame safety Kennedy Urlacher, son of NFL Hall of Fame linebacker Brian Urlacher. Oh, sorry, I'm thinking of somebody else. I'm completely slipped my mind. Sorry. Erase what I said before. He's entered the portal. Played 14 games last season. I'm thinking of Ned Bolcar from Phillipsburg, New Jersey. Sorry. Even as I sit here, there's just constant updates. I mean, I can't go through them all in the seating. Hopefully, Mr. Jason Priester will be joining. He's probably busy covering. You got Clemson baseball. You have Clemson softball. We'll be talking about the Clemson football game. A crap load of spring games over the weekend. Just a multitude. Well, some teams aren't having it anymore. Let's see. LSU had their spring game. Somebody that stood out was Barry and Brown. Let's see. The Kentucky transfer wide receiver and speedster consistently worked his way open and was sure-handed. So it looks like he stood out. I'm just reading over some of the notes here. This is from the Daily Advertiser. It looks like they're talking about the offensive line's rotation. Looks like LSU's pass rush was effective. Looks like the defense was the winner. Defensive backfield shined. So it looks like LSU trying to pick up where they left off last year. Kind of a down year for LSU last year for fans. Kentucky had their spring football game. Looks like they had an hour-long scrimmage. This is reported from KSR. Trying to look over some of the highlights. Looks like the receivers had a decent day. And that's really all it says. So Kentucky, again, really a down year last year for them. We'll see how they bounce back. Central Michigan Chippewas had their spring game. It was reported by CMUChippewas.com. His first spring game under new head coach Matt Drinkle. Offensively in the scrimmage, Central Michigan rushed 32 times for 106 yards. The offense 19 to 31 passing for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the defensive side of the ball, looks like Central Michigan had standouts. Defensive lineman Cade Costas. He had 2 tackles for loss. Linebacker Dakota Cochran and defensive back Kyle Krebs both had sacks. Defensive lineman Jay Sean Coleman and quarterback Kalen Carroll had a couple of pass breakups. So that concludes Central Michigan's spring. Purdue had their spring practice. This is reported by IndyStar.com. Purdue, who was the worst team in the Big Ten last year, they really have fallen on hard times. I'm just trying to read over some of the stuff here. Really not too many updates other than the fact that the emphasis on the spring practices has been on physicality because they got pushed around a lot last year. It was not good. It was bad. They look horrible every game. I'm not trying to get down on them, but it was not good. They were horrible. So hopefully things will improve for them in the upcoming season. You're not going to find quick turnarounds, but you want to be somewhat competitive to build confidence in a program. And again, the emphasis has been on physicality. Virginia had their spring workout. This is reported by SI.com, College, Virginia. He said 5 standouts for the Virginia football spring game. Josiah Abdullah, the receiver. He led all players with 92 purpose yards. Billy Kudelka. He's a 6'8", 255-pound Lynchburg native down there in Lynchburg, Virginia. He was originally committed to play Division I men's lacrosse at Jacksonville as an attack man, but fell in love with football his senior year. Some other standouts, Stevie Bracey and Miles Brown. On the defensive side of the ball, Jamari Taylor. He led all rushers with, 52 yards on 9 rushing attempts. And Dakota Twitty, the tight end. Again, Virginia has to be more physical in the ACC against teams like Clemson, like Miami, like North Carolina, like Florida State. And again, Virginia, a program that's kind of fallen on some bad times. South Alabama had their spring game. This is reported by AI.com. Sports. Seven-on-seven drills from what I'm seeing. Alabama, I think, went 7-6 last year, from what I remember. And Major Applewhite, that was his first year. Former Texas Longhorn QB. From what I was reading, South Alabama returns 14 players from last season to this spring. A lot of the starters sat out, though. So hopefully South Alabama can take the next jump, improve upon that 7-6 record, and start something there with Major Applewhite there. Alabama had their spring game. It looks like the quarterback battles between Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, and Keelan Russell. Alabama fans are probably still falling on their swords because of the season last year. So let's see. Let me pull it up here real quick. Ladies and gentlemen, I see him in the green room. He's a busy dude with Clemson baseball and Clemson softball and all things Clemson. But I want to do him justice here. Again, at JP_Priester on the Twitter. Beat writer at Clemson Insider. Opinions are his own. DMs always open. And of course, before I bring him on, I do it all the time. And now my screen's frozen. Let's see. Give me just a second. Maybe it'll come back. Oh, there we go. Before I bring him on, do him justice as always. This down there in Columbus, South Carolina, when they played the Citadel. That's right. Tiger Rag. That Tiger. Oh, that. If you don't know the song, you should know it by now. Thanks to the band there. Let's bring him on. There he is. There he is, Mr. Jason Priester. Jason, thanks for joining.
My pleasure, man. Glad we were able to work it out finally.
You can see that I've got my sweatshirt, one of the sweatshirts that I got down there at one of the Tiger shops off campus. Is this the champion one? No, I think it's a Nike one. I got a champion one too. It's got the purple. So, okay. So they had their spring game. From what I was reading here, now it looks like both quarterbacks had a decent day. I don't know what you really take away from spring games anymore. But just from what I'm reading here, let me see. Cade was 11-17 for 118 yards. Christopher, is it Vizina? He was 7 of 8 for 81 yards. Look, I don't know what we can say about this team last year. They wind up winning the ACC basically, but then they get, basically waxed in the playoff game. I would think they've got to be more physical in the trenches, Jason. Cade's going to be Cade. I know they've got maybe the receiving corps needs to be beefed up a little bit. I know they have a transfer. His name escapes me. He's like 6'5" or something like that. His name escapes me. I had it written down.
Tristan Smith.
That's what it is. What's the emphasis? What's been the emphasis in spring practice?
Defense. Wes Goodwin was let go at the end of the season after the loss to Texas. Clemson's run defense was as the worst it's been since before Brent Venables got there. During Wes Goodwin's tenure, his first two defenses, first 2 years, they were pretty solid. Carried a inept offense, at times over those first 2 years. But last year, they just kind of came off the rails. They just could not stop the run. And Tom Allen's been hired away from Penn State to kind of come in, revamp that thing, and it's been back to fundamentals. Not only was the run defense bad, but the tackling was just lacking at times. They struggled from an inability to set the edge. The linebackers weren't very gap sound a lot of the time. So I think they've kind of simplified things this spring, tried to get back to the basics. You could, some of the practices we were allowed in to watch, you could just hear Tom Allen. He's got his microphone in his hand, and he's telling them all, we're going to be the best tackling team in the country. We're going to be the best tackling team in the country. And despite them being without some some key defenders in the spring game, I do think we saw some signs of progress. The tackling looked much better. There wasn't a ton of room to run for the running backs that did play, particularly the first and second string guy. But I think they're headed in the right direction. And when they get some of these guys they were missing back this spring, they're all expected back for fall camp. They were still recovering from most of them from off-season procedures, from injuries from last year. But I think they've got the right guy in place to kind of get this defense back on track and play into the standard that's in place at Clemson.
I just was going through articles and stuff like that. So, the freshman running backs, David, is it Iyamume?
He's a redshirt freshman.
Freshman,
David
okay.
Iyamume.
And true freshman Gideon Davidson. It looked like they looked decent. They're going to have to replace Phil Maffa, obviously. What sort of emphasis more is going to be put on the run game this year, especially with the rotation of backs that they have?
I think they want to get back to being able to run the ball the way they did the first half of last season before Maffa got banged up and became basically ineffective over the last few games. The problem last year was you had Phil Maffa and really nobody else behind him that was kind of ready to step up and take on a key role. I don't think that's going to be the issue this year. You got the redshirt freshman in Iyamume, who looks like he's ready to take that next step. You got the true freshman in Gideon Davidson, who was one of the best backs in the country in the last class. He has, by all accounts, been fantastic this spring. Obviously, you got to get him up to speed in the pass protection and stuff, but he's going to be a guy that helps you. And then you got Adam Randall, who's kind of a wild card in this thing. They moved him to running back for the playoff game against Texas last year from receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was kind of the opinion, hey, yeah, he's a guy that can give you 3, 4, 5 carries a game and help you out a little bit. But it sounds like he's going to be the starting back, man. It sounds like the transition for him has been kind of seamless. I don't think anybody expected Gideon Davidson to go in there and win that job in the spring. I know I didn't. But we'll see if he can do it during the season. I've kind of figured he'd win it sooner than later. But based on some of the returns we've gotten about Adam Randall's transition, I'm not sure. I'm kind of wavering on that opinion now. I think they're going to be deeper at running back than some people think. I keep seeing all these articles about portal needs, and what always one of the top portal need is a veteran running back. Devos, when he talked about it a little bit after the spring game, he said, I understand people's going to question us all year long, and that's okay. He said he's been very encouraged by what he's seen from the backs. We didn't see much of Randall during the spring game, not carrying the ball. We saw a good bit of Davidson, but again, he was playing behind an offensive line that was missing pretty much every starter but 2, I think. And there just wasn't a whole lot of room to run, but he certainly looks the part. He made a lot of plays in the passing game out of the backfield. And again, Easy looks like he's ready to take a step. Still runs a little bit upright, too high sometimes, which kind of impact the ball security, but that's something that's correctable and something they're working on. But I think they're going to have a fair. I think that stable of backs is probably going to be better than some people think.
Talk to me about the receiving core from the standpoint of they really haven't had that like go-to guy. They might say they had a go-to guy, but I don't think they really had a go-to guy the last couple of years, Jason. Who out of that receiving core do you think is going to have a big year this year?
Clemson's going to have one of the best wide receiver groups in the country.
Okay. Okay.
I know that's bold.
I know. Okay.
I think Antonio Williams has kind of evolved into that go-to guy, not your prototypical go-to guy you envision when you think about some of those older Clemson teams, when you're thinking Mike Williams, Sammy Watkins, Nuke Hopkins. He's more of a slot guy, and he's kind of become Klubnik's safety valve or go-to or whatever you want to call it. But then you had those, you know what you got in Antonio, but you got those two guys that were freshmen last year. Both were 5 stars, Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore. Wesco kind of had his coming out party early in the season. It took Moore a little bit longer to kind of get acclimated. He wasn't an early enrollee. Probably had his best game against Texas, actually. I think that's a guy that's going to take a massive jump this year is TJ Moore. I think Wesco is only going to get better. And I think the kid they brought in through the portal is going to be a guy that helps them too. He gives you that big, long target on the outside that can go up and high point the ball and win those 50-50 balls. That's kind of the one thing they were missing. And man, he put on a show in the spring game. He was definitely the standout guy. I forget what his numbers were, but he absolutely had his coming out party that day. Had one 70-something yard touchdown catch that he just went up over the top of the defender and pulled it down and took off and was gone. But I don't think he's going to be one of your 3 starters, obviously, but he's going to be a guy that's in the rotation, and they're going to rotate those guys in and out. And then you got a guy like Cole Turner who's back, who I think is going to be a real good complementary piece for you. So you got some weapons there, and I think again, you know what you got in Antonio, and I think those 2 guys that were freshmen last year in Wesco and TJ Moore, I think you're going to see them really start to kind of come on this year, even more so than they did last year.
Talk to me about the back end of the defense. Is it improved from last year?
I like what Clemson's got at corner. I think Avion Terrell kind of had a rough second half of the season last year. I just think a lot of those guys on that defense were just getting frustrated the deeper you got into the season. I really like Ashton Hampton at the other corner spot. He was a freshman last year. He's tall, or he's long and athletic. He's kind of your prototypical Mike Reed corner. You got a couple of you get Jaden Lucas back, who's played a lot of football for Clemson the last few years. Looks like he might be finally healthy now.
Mm-hmm.
You got a young kid that redshirted last year, Corian Gibson, who was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. He was hurt started last year, so he didn't really factor in much last year, but now he's had a year in the system. I do think you got a question that's safety. Get Khalil Barnes back, who had the fantastic freshman season, was a freshman All-American, thought he kind of had a little bit of a sophomore slump last year. But you lose R.J. Mickens, who was kind of the heart and soul of the back end of that defense last year. He just provided so much value for you on the back end. He was kind of the quarterback back there, if you will. Just been around forever. He spent 6 years on that defense, so everybody kind of looked to him. It's going to be, that's kind of one of the questions. Who's going to step up and take that spot? You got a guy like Colin Griffin who played a lot of football last year. You got a true sophomore in Ricardo Jones who flashed a lot last year, a ball hawk, another tall, long, athletic safety type. And then you got a guy like Ronan Hannafin, he began his career at receiver. He was an athlete coming out of high school, wanted to try receiver. They let him do it, but they think he's going to be better suited to play the back end. And he's kind of been working at safety full time since about the middle of last season, if I'm remembering right. Just one of those guys that just love. He's a very physical player. He loves the contact. He loves the tackling. So they got to get one of those safety spots figured out. I feel pretty good about Barnes, rebounding from his sophomore slump. We've seen what he can do. We know he can do it again. And particularly in this Tom Allen defense that really relies on those safeties at times. And then you got a guy like Shelton Lewis who can play the nickel. He's played corner and nickel. So, I mean, I like some of the pieces they got on the back end. The biggest question for me is who's going to step up and win that job opposite of Barnes at safety.
So we're heading. I don't like to call it fall camp because it's not fall camp. It's summer camp. So we're done with spring. We're heading into August. So I'm just looking at the schedule. God forbid injuries and stuff like that. They open with LSU. That's in Memorial Stadium there in Clemson. Probably be a night game. That'll be a telltale right off the get-go. But they get Troy at home, at Georgia Tech, which is always iffy. Home against Syracuse might be a toughie. At North Carolina, they've already had like 12 players bolt for the transfer portal. At Boston College, home they get SMU at home. They get Duke at home. They get Florida State at home. At Louisville, home against Furman. At South Carolina, which they'll have revenge on their minds. I don't see why they can't win the ACC again.
I fully expect them to win the ACC again. I'm not saying they're going to run the table or anything like that. That first game's obviously going to be a big test with LSU coming to town. But this team returns one of the most experienced offenses in the country. They got one of the most experienced quarterbacks returning in the country, probably one of the best quarterbacks returning in the country. He's got a dangerous group of pass catchers. That offensive line was really solid under Matt Luke's guidance in his first year there last year. Still think they got another step they can take with the run defense, but the pass protection was solid. And then again, I just think you're going to see a different defense than what we saw last year. I think at times Wes Goodwin he maybe got a little too complex with some of his game plan and scheming and stuff, and you get guys out there that are overthinking and thinking too much instead of just playing freely. And that's been a big point of emphasis, is kind of simplifying things and just letting them, play more freely. And I think I think you're going to see a much improved defense. But I mean, I think this team's capable of being a top 10 team. I fully expect them to win the ACC and make it back to the playoff. The question for me is, I think they're a playoff caliber team. The question becomes, what can they do once they get there?
Right. You know what the narrative on Cade's going to be. He has flashes. He's taking steps, but at times he makes the most inopportune decision. So what step does he need to take this year to improve upon what he did last year?
I think that narrative that you just talked about should be dead and buried.
Okay.
We didn't see a lot of that last year. He threw 6 picks. He had, I think, 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He was much, much better with his decision-making. You could just tell the game had kind of slowed down for him. He had better help at receiver. Again, his pass protection was more solid last year. But I think that's why you're seeing him mentioned as one of the favorites to win the Heisman. I'm not saying he's going to win it, but you see he's getting some of the better odds in the country on a lot of lists you see coming out of Vegas right now. For me, the biggest thing for me with him was with some of his deep balls. They tend to float a little bit and have a little too much air on him, but he's gotten so much stronger the past 2 years. I was watching him in pregame before the spring game, and those deep balls, they weren't those lollipop rainbows anymore. He was throwing those things with more laser-like precision. As long as he stays healthy, his offensive line stays healthy, and those pass catchers stay healthy, I think he's going to have a really good season. If you get what you got out of him last year, you got to be happy. But I think he's got another step he can take.
Before I let you go, and I hate doing this, I hate bringing it up all the time because I hate the transfer portal, I hate NIL. Um, the whole Nico Iamaleva thing. I mean, you're down there in ACC country, obviously. Um, what do players say? What do coaches say? What do presidents say? I mean, my whole thing is when they did the transfer portal and they came out with NIL, did they not envision these types of scenarios going on? Like it came out now that, before the playoffs started, his representation said that since we made the playoffs, we should deserve more money because the season's longer and all this stuff is coming out. What did they say down in ACC? What's the feel? What's the general feel down there?
It's just the wild, wild west. I mean, the NCAA spent 2 years working on NIL legislation, and then they lost that Supreme Court battle, and basically got slapped down by the Supreme Court, and they don't have any teeth to really do anything. They tried to go after a couple schools, Tennessee for NIL violations actually, and Tennessee sued them and beat them in court. So there's just not a lot they could do, from enforcing the rules. They'll get sued and they'll lose. I think until we get to a place where we can have some collective bargaining and have some contracts, I just think we're in for a bumpy ride until we get to that point. But I don't think this is anywhere close to the first time something like this happened. It's just the first. It's just the first time we're hearing about it. I know of a player during the 2023 season who was injured, and when he came back, he missed most of the season. When he was ready to come back with about 2 games, maybe 3 games left in the regular season, he goes back to the school and tells him he needs more money or he's not going to play. Well, he didn't play. He didn't play the rest of the year, and he transferred out after that. So this is stuff that's been going on. We just haven't heard a lot about it. The quarterback at Nevada last year, that was over an NIL dispute. He leaves the team after 4 games and says he's entering the portal, or he enters the portal right then. I can't remember specifically. So he could keep that final year of eligibility. He says they didn't pay what they owed him. They say they paid everything they owed him. So who knows who's telling the truth? But it kind of it's just where you are right now, man. I've always, especially over the past 10 years or so, with these massive television contracts and these massive athletic budgets, that I've always felt the players should get a piece of the pie. But this landscape and this era we're in right now, it's not sustainable. It's just not. Fans are losing interest because of schools can't keep rosters intact. They don't want to see a guy play for your school 1 year and then you bring in a whole new roster the next year and a whole new roster the next year because nobody wants to stay in one place. That's turning fans off, particularly the older casual fans. It's just not sustainable, and I think we'll get there at some point. Maybe not in the next 2-3 years, but maybe by the end of the decade, when the new television contracts are up and being negotiated. I think we're probably going to see a complete break from the NCAA, and football look a lot different about 8 to 10 years from now. But it just kind of is what it is. I feel like Nico probably got some bad advice. I will be surprised. It sounds like he's headed to UCLA, and he probably is taking a pay cut to go there. We're talking about a guy that enters the portal asking for $4 million, but he's got no leverage. North Carolina says, we don't want you. Tulane says, we're not. I mean, UCLA was basically the last team standing. What makes anybody think they're going to pay him his asking price? Is basically, if you're UCLA, you say, here, man, here's the offer, take it or leave it. So he had no leverage. I just think he got some terrible advice.
Andrew Luck is the general manager of the Stanford program across the board. When we're talking about general managers and asking for money because you're making the playoffs, ladies and gentlemen, it's not college sports anymore. This is semi-pro sports. Take away the college athletics. your superstars and your high recruits, they're not going to college anymore to get an education. They're going there to play football or play whatever and get paid. By the way, before I let you go, better shot at a national title, Clemson, NCAA, Clemson baseball or softball? Which team has a better shot?
Baseball. Even though softball's on the heater, man, it looked like to begin the season that they were going to kind of be in a rebuild. They lost a lot from their team last year, and I don't really cover softball that closely, but they got a lot of young players, and they got off to kind of a slow start. And, after about the third week, man, they've turned it around. They've been on a roll here lately, won a couple of big series, beat South Carolina last night in walk-off fashion. But that Clemson baseball team, if I had to pick one or the two, it'd be that one, man. They've not lost a series all year long. They got a couple of questions they got to answer on the pitching staff. One of the guys, after a strong start's kind of struggled here recently, so they got to get that figured out. But they're ranked actually third in the country now in D1 baseball. They've lost 6 games all season. Whether they got enough pitching to go out and win it all, I don't know. But if I had to pick one of the two to win it all, I'd probably roll with baseball.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Jason Priester at JP_Priester on the Twitter machine. Jason, thanks so much for coming on. I will pick your brain over the summertime, especially after camp, because I will be having my second annual college football special show sometime at the end of August. Jason, always a pleasure, man. Thanks.
Appreciate it, my man.
All right, man. Have a good one. You know what? I was going to play his music going out, but again, as a college football fan, I will still enjoy the games. But all the extracurricular bullshit, I can't stand. NIL, transfer portal, everything that's going down. And again, when they did NIL, I thought they should have come up with a rule where you have to be in school so long, at said school, for you to even sniff the money. Kids are signing NIL deals right out of high school. And what have they done? What have they proved? What have they done to earn it? Nothing. Imagine if I go to my job, you go to your job right now and say, hey, yeah, I'll sign on. I'll sign on for, I don't know, $30,000 a year. And then 4 months into it, well, I'm outperforming everybody. I want $50,000 a year. You know what your employer's going to tell you? You go pound sand. But like Jason said, it is what it is. These are the times we're living in. Some crazy ass times, man. Crazy. Some crazy shit. Nothing ever ceases to amaze me, though. So, there was more spring games over the weekend, but I'm going to end it there. There's more spring games this weekend. So I will try and dedicate student body right next week to going over all the spring games. So with all that being said, again, enjoy the sports that are on tonight. I didn't say this on because I forgot to say it on early evening sports buffet with the Ginch. So I'll say it now. Practice compassion, practice empathy. Have passion for what you do. Hug somebody. You might make their day. Tell somebody you love them. You might not get that second chance. And if you see somebody struggling, just don't poo-poo it under the rug. If you see somebody struggling, inquire. You might be saving a life. With all that being said, I will play that song again, Taking It Out.
Far away from me. far, I just can't see. You're so far